who's with us as well, Mark Holloway. I'm sorry, Mark, you weren't on my list of attendees, and of course you should have been. So Mark as Director of Facilities, in fact, perhaps Mark, you could say hello as well. So we'll get into that in a moment. So we are recording this meeting, and I can see that recording has started. It tells me that at the top of my screen. And so this will go to our YouTube channel. And so please, colleagues, be aware that there's a recording being made of this for transparency, for openness, for publication, and to properly call the Council of Governors to account. Reminder that what's the purpose of the Council of Governors? Well, the Council is to hold non-executives to account for board performance and to represent our membership and the general public. And just in that spirit, we've had a really useful hour and a quarter just prior to this meeting amongst governors and non-exec colleagues only. It's an opportunity for informal discussion, debates around the particular areas. And what we tend to do is we invite the champions to lead discussions on whether it be audit, finance and performance, quality and people. And obviously there's an open invite for questions in relation to those things. That follows actually a meeting of the governors themselves, and the governors therefore begin the informal meeting with Ned, sometimes with 4 or 5 things on the mind. Mel, I'm absolutely assuming, in fact, I now see that you've got the message that you would, of course, have included vaccination programme as part of your update. So I can see that you've got that and that you will. Laura, I'll have a chat with you about the transparency of our decision-making process. So there's a suggestion from one governor that governors are always clear reading papers as to what options might have been considered and not considered and what data had been taken into account. So it's just something I'd like you to reflect on, please, and we can have a chat about the way in which we make that clear in our papers, the use of data. A couple of the items that were mentioned to me are matters on the agenda, items 8 and 11. So something about, in fact, Laura, it was the point that you and I raised about NED reappointments and the NRC terms of reference. And it was Alistair's point from the previous discussion. So I've let Alistair know that we've got that point in mind, and it will form a later iteration of the terms of reference.
Yeah, Max, just to confirm, sorry, it's not part of the terms of reference, it's part of the actual appointment process. So it is a separate document which will come to the next Governor's NRC meeting. That's
great. I think Alistair was keen to know that that was part of our thinking, so that's fine. At item 11, colleagues, is the chair appraisal process that Selina will present. I will absent myself from the meeting at that point so that you can have a proper discussion. And as I said to Governor colleagues, if I'm invited back in, I'll be happy to do so straight after you've dealt with item 11. So I think it's proper that I absent myself in order that you can discuss the appraisal process for your chairman. And just for colleagues to be aware of, it was raised with me again about the how governors can get to understand the business of our academies, and in particular whether we might accede to governors attending academy meetings as observers. Now, I've explained in the pre-meeting what NHS providers' guidance is regarding that. I do have concerns that it's the one and only opportunity for non-exec directors to sit in a closed meeting with exec colleagues and really get into different areas of scrutiny and questioning. But I also recognise that governors want to better do their job in understanding how well the NEDs are doing theirs by perhaps seeing what goes on at the academy. So I've asked for some guidance to be circulated to governor colleagues, and I've also asked that each of the academies takes into account how they might consider involving governors in the academy business and making sure they're well cited on that. Okay, I'll just make sure I'm not allowing anybody into the meeting, which I think is fine. I'm opened up. Okay. So that's by the way of preamble. Welcome everybody to our Council of Governors meeting. I think we can already quickly see our new Associate Director of Corporate Governance's stamp all over this. there's quite a number of matters to transact and to take for approval, decision and steer. So thank you for that, Laura, and welcome. We have a number of matters that are down on the agenda. So there'll be the Chairman's report, NED appointments, Council of Governors terms of reference, and the Nominations and Remunerations Committee terms of reference. We'll hear from Wendy or David on the NRC report, our own membership of the NRC, the chair appraisal process, for which I will leave briefly, the quality report, locally selected indicator, Foundation Trust membership plan, some work we're going to do to refresh that, the Governor's Code of Conduct, Governor's Annual Evaluation and Skills and Knowledge Audit, the Governor Induction Programmes, and our work programme for the coming 3 years. So that's the intended business of the meeting. We'll then try and make sure we give at least half an hour's time to Mel to talk us through those issues the Chief Executive would wish to bring to our attention, and also to talk about Actors 1. So that arose from a previous action, a previous meeting, and we'll hear a bit about how we're trying to work well as a system. And believe you me, there's been significant changes at Bradford Teaching Hospital regarding the way in which we work together with local health and care organisations over the years. So there's some terrific work going on there as a system. You will have the reports from the board regulation committees of October and November, and Barry's audit committee from October to note. So they're there for your information, and I'll try and make sure if anybody wants to raise anything from those. But I think we've kind of done that in the first meeting. Can I ask whether does anybody bring any specific items of other business that they wish me to make time for? We've quite a lot on the agenda to get through, haven't we? So we'll try and be as slick as we can. I haven't seen any proposed items of other business, so that's great. So we'll leave it at that. Okay. We have some apologies from John Prashard, unfortunately, is not able to join us, although John hopes he might be able to come a little bit later. And I think what I'll do first, colleagues, we got Karen Walker and Altaf to say hello to governors. So I'll just turn to the new executive members of our board of directors and ask Ray to say hello and Mark to say hello by way of introduction. So Ray, shall I turn to you first, please?
Yes, hi, thanks, Max. So hello, everybody. My name's Ray Smith, for those that I haven't had the opportunity to meet. I'm the new Chief Medical Officer. I've taken over from Brian, so big shoes to fill there. Officially as from the beginning of January. I've been a long-standing doctor at BTHFT, so going back a long time. So my first job was back in 1988, I think, in Bradford, and I've been a consultant in Bradford for the last 22 years. So I know the organisation very well. I'm very passionate about the organisation and its people, and I hope to make the acquaintance of as many of you as I can going forward. Thanks, Max.
Thank you very much indeed, Ray. Sarge, I'm not sure if the governors would have met you as well, so perhaps ask you to say hello. I apologise if you were at the previous council.
Yeah, I was at the previous meeting, Max, so people will have had the opportunity to meet me, but just in case, I'll reintroduce myself. So I'm Sarge Azeb, Chief Operating Officer here at the Trust, and I've been here since the 12th of October, having moved across from Leeds Teaching Hospitals, where I was Deputy Chief Operating Officer.
Thanks very much, Saj. And indeed, of course, in my winter bulletin to you, governors, it was Saj who wrote the piece on our current performance of where we are. So, of course, thank you very much, Saj. And Mark, welcome onto the board of directors, and perhaps you'd like to tell governor colleagues a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, everybody. So my name is Mark Holloway. I'm the Director of Estates and Facilities. So I've moved to Bradford Teaching Hospitals from Nottingham University Hospitals. And I've had various different estates and facilities director leadership jobs over the last 20 years nearly now in the NHS service. So my background is as a building services engineer. I worked in the private sector as a consultant engineer, moved into the NHS looking after what's known as hard and soft FM services. So what I look after for the organisation is the building, the engineering, the clinical engineering department, or biomedical engineering as it's sometimes called, and all the soft services around cleaning, security, patient movement, waste and food service, etc., along with the capital development team. And as probably a lot of you are seeing at the moment, we've got a lot of capital development on the go at the moment, which is fantastic here for Bradford. So hopefully that's a useful introduction for you all, and thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mark. That's very helpful. Thank you. Thanks. Okay. I'm just hearing Wendy might be trying to get into the meeting with us, and seeing she's lead governor, we really ought to let her in, didn't we? But I can't see any requirement for me to admit anybody to the meeting, David. So if you're in contact with Wendy, it might just be worth checking with her. Yeah, thanks. And I'll maybe ask Jackie to have a look at that as well. Maybe she's trying to link to the wrong meeting, as I did earlier today. So yeah, going into the last meeting. So if Wendy comes through, I'll let her in. Okay, thanks everybody. Knowing what the agenda items are then, and there are no other items of business, I declare my interest, my personal interest in item 11. So I'll absent myself for that item. Does anybody else declare any interest in these particular agenda items? Are there any personal interests that ought to be noted? Dermot, would you like to say something?
Only that I am now officially part of the Actors One team in my part of my job. So delighted to, looking forward to seeing what Mel has to say about it, so I can learn a few things.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Dermot. Yes, that's noted. Thank you. And that's good. And is Wendy with us now? Yeah. Okay, she's coming into the right meeting anyway. Yeah. Okay. So we'll start by going through the minutes, please, of the meeting of 15th of October. May I ask whether there are any matters of amendment or inaccuracy that we ought to note, please?
Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Amit. Yeah.
Yes. So I have been mentioned in the minutes, and you remember I raised issue about the JSC election. Although the way that has been minuted has been in many ways slightly inaccurate, and in some ways representing me as if I threw a tantrum, I pulled a Donald Trump. So that definitely wasn't the case. So I would like to send a different draft of precisely what I said there. But the key points to keep in mind were that basically I was critical of the fact that there was this concept of linking the foundation trust to appointment to this body rather than treating all governors as equal. So I did not specifically say you should have more than one or any specific number associated with one foundation trust. I rather said decouple that concept of associating a governor with specific foundation trust and then saying, therefore, you are from that foundation trust. No, because once you are appointed to this body, you are acting in the best interest of health. You're not acting on behalf of this foundation trust. And that should reflect in the way these elections and nominations to these elections happen. So that was my first point. My next point was that I use myself as an example to say if I were to want to stand, then there will be a difficult choice for our governors to make. But why should they have to make that choice when the skills that are provided by the incumbent, by Pauline, and the skills that I may bring to this body are entirely different things. So just because we are labeled as Bradford Teaching Hospital, although we are very different people, the governors are being asked to make very difficult choice if I were to suggest to stand. The next thing I also mentioned was that the process was a little bit cursory in some respects, in that if you are being given just 200 words, then if you have got a rich, broad profile, there is only so much of it that you can put in the 200 words. Again, in 200 words, if you're trying to put both your motivation and your background, then that gives an obvious advantage to an incumbent, because the incumbent will be able to say, look, I've been serving you for the last 3 years, you know me, and then talk a little bit about motivation. Whereas for a new candidate from whichever trust, it becomes that much harder. And what I then did was I firstly supported Pauline's candidature on the point that she has been conscientious in her work. And then I also added a practical note to say it's also going to be easier for her to be re-elected given the 200 words limit. So that was the whole of what I mentioned, rather than simply saying, I'm sad that I'm not being allowed to stand.
Thank you, Amit. If you wish to send that amended note
Yes,
through, we'll make sure that's...
Yes, I will send a proper draft.
Yeah, we'll make sure that that's put to governors as a true record of what you intended. That's fine. Indeed, we do have a bit of an update for you on that, because we did take up the point and may well have addressed some of your issues anyway. But I'll pass to Jackie for that in a moment. Okay. Can I just make sure are there any other matters of inaccuracy or amendment that ought to be noted, please? Can we take Dermot? Yes. Just on mute, Dermot.
I'm not quite sure which minutes it is, but I think it may well be the one from July, the closed board or something like that. But there was a reference to NED remuneration, and there were two different figures there. That was on document CG 121.3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, those will be dealt with at the closed meeting.
Oh, is that the end? Sorry. Right. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah. Thanks, Jackie. Yeah. Okay. And I think we're still waiting for Wendy. There's nobody waiting to come in, David. So hopefully she's trying. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So Amit, we've picked up on your points there. That's absolutely fine. We'll take the draft. The matters arising from the minutes. So we're going to take those as a true record of the meeting. The matters arising. There are 4 of those. I propose to colleagues that the second, third, and fourth of those are all agenda items today, in which those action items will be discussed. So action 2 on our list is item 13, action 3 on our list is item 14, and action 3 on our list is item 19 on today's agenda. Okay, so I'm going to propose that we close those on the basis that those matters can be discussed properly. But the first action actually did relate to the issue regarding increasing the number of nominations from individual trusts. And although we hear from Amit that it may not refer to exactly the point you were wishing to make, Jackie has pursued some of this and has a little bit more information. So, Jackie, would you like to share that with governors, please?
Yeah, I mean, just to say, I did pass it to Pauline, and Pauline very kindly, Pauline Garnett very kindly got a response back from the representative of the GAC committee. So, and I'm sorry, I didn't hear everything that you were saying, Amit. So if some of it either crosses that or you know, kind of contradicts what you said, then I'm very sorry. But they were saying that their election rules currently state that there's 1 candidate per trust, and they cannot change that for this election. But they have said they will consider the comment when reviewing their rules for the next election. They did go on to kind of cite a number of reasons why they don't necessarily encourage more than 1 candidate per trust. They do say that, you know, kind of committees with more than 15 members risk being unwieldy and difficult to operate. The current structure does allow representation from across a number of different categories. They also say that this round they did have 55 nominations, where trusts have put forward 1 candidate, and with 2 candidates that would kind of, I think this is down to the resourcing that they have, it would make voting an unmanageable task. They do try and understand governor needs and issues from a range of different programmes and activities that they undertake. So as well as the Governor Advisory Committee, they've got several mechanisms to achieve this. This includes opportunities in their Governwell training programme, their virtual workshops, through their e-newsletter, through their National Governor Focus Conference. They also, you know, kind of talk about a dedicated email where governors are able to get in touch directly. and they have regular dialogue with trust chairs, trust secretaries, and other, kind of governors from different trusts. So over the past 8 years, they state that their committee structure and these intelligence gathering mechanisms have enabled them to achieve high governor satisfaction rates across all their products and services, as well as evolve and expand the programme that they deliver to governors. So kind of quite a general rounded response there from GAC NHS providers.
Thank you, Jackie. Amit, I'll let you have a final word if you wish on this issue.
Yes, I mean, I've been hearing this going back to before this organization was called, became a committee of NHS providers. In a previous incarnation, it used to be called FTGA, and that had the same problem. The problem is not that there enough foundation trusts are not sending candidates. They are, as Jackie just said. The problem is that one foundation trust can have 2 really good governors for this kind of work. And it needs to be a combination of what those individual candidates are good for, which will be explored better if there is more scope for writing a longer statement and doing hustings and those kind of things. Okay. Being able to get the best candidates regardless of whether they come from the same trust, as may happen from time to time.
Okay, thanks, Amit. What we'll do is we will note your new draft of your minutes. And Jackie, could I ask you, please, on receipt of that from Amit, to speak with Amit about whether you'd wish to make representations to GAC in accordance with Amit's thoughts? So it might be that maybe a letter to GAC just pointing out some of the weaknesses might help. But we are where we are at the moment. We have a set of rules that we have to abide by, and so that's fine. Okay. I don't want to spend more time on that. We'll move on now into other matters of the agenda. So if I can draw your attention, please, to item 5, the Chairman's report. You can see that there are 7 items on there. I hope governors have had the chance to read that through. But I've talked about the way in which we are conducting and continuing our Council of Governors meetings. I think I realised through Pauline that some trusts have actually suspended them for a while. So we're trying to still run ours as we do. There are 3 governor elections coming up in February in Shipley, Bradford South and Bradford West for colleagues to note. The item 3 for me is the fact that we've got the Governor Advisory Committee elections, that Pauline is standing, and I hope it's not too inappropriate of me to say I hope people will vote for Pauline, but I'm sure I'm allowed to say that from the chair, and that we continue to be represented at that national committee. Governor Focus is mentioned at item 4, which gives some details of virtual governor training and Govern Well training that's available to governor colleagues. And at number 5, I repeat the point of my winter bulletin, which I'll just come back to in a moment, I think. And added to this, we have an item from Pat following a question on the Kinnair review. So I'm just going to ask Pat to mention a little bit about that. It's a good example of governors pre-meeting having a question. How has the trust inputted to the review, and how has the trust reacted to its findings? So although you've got a written response there from me, I will just ask Pat to say a little word about that in support of it. And I also at 6 and 7 mentioned my quarterly meeting with governors and the joint session that we've just had today. I just want to return you briefly to the winter bulletin that went out in my name, just to remind you of some of the terrific performance that's been referred to in there. So just get my little note here. So Sarge did a performance update for us here, and those of you that were present at Board of Directors yesterday will have heard me say how much we appreciate and respect the significant additional amounts of work that certainly some of our colleagues are putting in at the moment. It applies to all staff, I'm sure, but obviously we see certain ones highlighted of the work that we're doing in ICU, etc. And yet, despite this, this trust is going from strength to strength on many important aspects of our nationally measured performance metrics. I can see Wendy's trying to get in, so I'll just admit to that. So I did just want to remind you, and I know it was in the winter bulletin, but I do just want to remind you that if you look at accident and emergency performance at type 1, we are in the first quartile, the top quartile nationally for our performance as to how quickly and how effectively we deal with people who come in. For cancer 2-week waits, if you're in Bradford, you are regularly in the top 25 performing national diagnosis standards to get seen within 14 days and to find out whether or not we've got a problem. We are regularly in there for cancer 2-week waits. And who wants to stay in hospital longer than 21 days, other than my wife during pregnancies, which for some reason she extended, but anyway, I think she was enjoying the food. Length of stay, over 21 days. There is a metric in order to keep that down. We regularly are one of the lowest in the country. Now, I'm saying this slightly tongue-in-cheek, but I just want to bring your attention to for A&E performance and for cancer performance, it's quite easy to look across the patch and have a look at performance elsewhere. I've told you how brilliant we are, and we outperform our colleagues in Leeds for those two areas. So you know, the big trust we've got at Leeds, the big neighbours, and some of us in Bradford might tend to think we're in the shadow of Leeds. Well, we are better than Leeds. We are better than Leeds at A&E performance, and we are better than Leeds at cancer 2-week wait performance. So I don't mean to suggest that as any form of competition with our friends across the border there, but I'm making the point that there's brilliant service being provided to Bradford people by Bradford clinicians. And I think it's important that we recognise that. And I am pleading with you as governors to repeat that message. You represent the public. I suggest that I would want you to repeat that and say it and spread the message of how well we're doing in these important nationally measured areas. Okay, that's me off my soapbox. That was my bit on the winter bulletin, but I was keen to emphasise that, how well we're doing in spite of all the pressures we're under. We are national outliers for excellence in certain areas. Okay. Pat, the Canary Review, governors were keen to know how we'd contributed to that. You might want to remind governors what that is and just very briefly tell them what we're up to with that, please.
Yeah, sure. So the Canary Review is otherwise known as the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Health and Care Partnership Review around tackling health inequalities for Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities and colleagues. And it was very much set up to understand the impact of COVID on our BAME communities and staff. The themes that came out from the review, there was four key themes really. One was around improving access to safe work for BAME colleagues in West Yorkshire and Harrogate. The next was ensuring that our leadership was reflective of the communities we serve. Thirdly, was around population planning, so using information to make sure that our services meet different groups' needs. And fourth was around reducing inequalities in mental health outcomes. And there is there's a very detailed report, but there is also a good summary report if members would like that circulated. In terms of our input, so Kes Hyatt, as our EDI lead, inputted to the review by providing a personal testimony. And his testimony was around primarily his support to the chaplaincy service within the first wave of COVID. And he very much gave his lived experience to the review. And also Fahim Lal, my deputy, has since been involved in the action planning process from the review as part of the regional BAME network and as part of his role in that. A detailed action plan from the review was presented to the West Yorkshire and Harrogate Partnership Board in December. And as a trust, as we review our EDI objectives, we'll be ensuring that the race review recommendations are aligned and included in those objectives. In terms of our approach as a trust, so obviously we've got this comprehensive review. We also had in December the phase 3 letter phase 3 letter on operational priorities for next year, which was clear that addressing health inequalities was a priority for action this year and next, and that systems were expected to make progress. So in light of both this review and the national position, we have set up an Equality and Diversity Council within the Trust, which is going to be chaired by Mel as Chief Executive. And we've got a meeting next week. We've got wide-ranging membership on that, and the Council will have a very clear focus on the health inequalities agenda. And at the meeting next week, we'll be starting to agree our priorities for action, very much linked back to the recommendations that have come out from this review. Probably the other thing I would say is that we now do have a very active, we've got 3 active networks, but particularly our BAME network is very active, and I do have to sort of thank Kez for that. And we also have a core membership group who are leading and sort of taking forward pieces of work for us in the organisation. And then they again will be actively involved in taking forward the recommendations, and representatives from the networks will sit on the Equality and Diversity Council.
Pat, would you like to remind governors what the other 2 networks are that we have?
Yeah, so we've got the Enable network, which is made up of staff who have disabilities or long-term health conditions, and we've got our LGBT network.
Thanks very much, Pat. Thanks. So, and as you heard earlier, Selena is all over this as well. She's going to be leading the People Academy, and we'll be watching closely with the development of the Equality and Diversity Council, which is a great idea, and will be personally led by Mel, certainly in the first place. So I think it's time for action there. So we'll be seeing some good action that way. Thanks. If colleagues are content to note my report, I will move on to the other matters of business. Yeah. So shall we move to? Somebody shout out. Alex,
am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes. So first of all, my thanks to everyone who has worked on the outcome of Kinnaird review, because I was one of the governors who had brought that to attention of the trust. I think the trust has overall started this really well, and I hope the momentum continues. When the Kinnaird review was happening, I felt they were not pulling punches. They were sincere. They were earnest in what they were trying to do. But there was a real risk that people who appeared before the review were all system insiders. So diversity and richness of input could have been improved while the review was happening. And I would very much urge the trust, as you go forward, of course, we need to protect our staff first and foremost. They are putting themselves in harm's way each day, every day, and they need to be physically and mentally well in order to do that. But also think about the wider population whom we are ultimately there to serve. And think about the diversity characteristics that we may be missing out when we focus on a relatively insider cohort, for want of a better term. And I can also illustrate this, and indeed I can go beyond just the protected characteristics and into other characteristics by taking just one example. So right now there is a huge amount of digital poverty around. And that is increasing all kinds of inequality, including attainment inequality, social justice, social progression, and also health inequality. And I am aware of some of our trust volunteers who have, for example, not had access to a land-based broadband internet free for as much as they want to use. And in that circumstance, they have had to use their own out-of-pocket resources to get additional data on their mobile contracts. and they have, in some cases, submitted their expenses to the trust. And the trust doesn't have policies to deal with that kind of situation. So the trust has referred the matter to internal audit, and hopefully everything will sort out in fullness of time. But this is the point, when we are hyper-specific in our policies, when we don't consider people who are not just like us in writing down the policies, and then we don't have practical, expedient solutions when people are outliers, then that itself can be a form of exclusion. And even when things get right in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year's time, the delay in making these decisions, in being inclusive in the overall approach, can amount to a denial. Inclusion delayed is inclusion denied. So I would also like the trust to focus very much on how we can make our services really, really, really inclusive. So all services that are provided remotely, can we provide them on a 0800 number? So it doesn't matter if the person has access to really good broadband or not. Those kind of ways, because it's not simply about color of someone's skin. Exclusion and discrimination happens on all sorts of characteristics all the time.
Okay, I mean, that's very well put, thanks. And I appreciate you are calling in, so you may not be able to see a screen, but I could see that Selena, who will be championing the People Academy, was nodding there and understood the points you were making. So they've been well received. Pat's obviously also heard everything you've said. So thank you very much for your input. I'm going to move now to item 6, which is NED appointments. And Jackie, just bring to our attention the points of the paper and what you're asking of Council of Governors.
Thank you, Max. Just in terms of the non-exec director appointments, this paper is really to bring into the public sphere the work that has been going on with the closed Council of Governors and the NRC with regard to the appointments of Altaf Sadiq and Karen Walker. You can see from the paper we had the various NRC virtual meetings on the 8th of September where they considered Altaf's appointment then. I mean, the governors have had this information in October, but due to various checks and things, we couldn't really, kind of release the names of the people who had been put forward. So it's really to note that Altaf was took up his post rather on the 1st of December. Having completed all the necessary checks and so on, joined the board on the 1st of December. And Karen Walker, whose appointment was initially considered by the NRC on the 15th of October. Information was then sent through to the Council of Governors to consider about her appointment. They appointed her on the 20th of October. All the checks have been completed and Karen's now joined the board from the 1st of January. Profile information is included within the paper as well. This is also available online. Our communications team will be doing a profile on both Karen and Altaf to introduce them to our broader communities. There's section 3 within this paper which talks about Laura Stroud. Laura finished her term. She was actually reappointed by the council in July when they considered her kind of moving forward to a second term then. But unfortunately, shortly before the end of her first term, she tendered her resignation due to work priorities and so on. So it's just to let the council know, because this is an appointment that they're not necessarily responsible for the whole process for. They are responsible, though, for formally appointing her at a Council of Governors meeting. And so just letting the council know that moves are afoot with the School of Medicine in Leeds to seek a suitable replacement for Laura.
Thank you, Jackie. Colleagues content to note? Yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And moving to item 7, the Council of Governors Terms of Reference, Laura, which should be annually reviewed. David, did you want to come in?
Sorry, yeah, just quick. Any idea on the timescales for Laura's replacement?
I think Mel, you've been the latest to speak with the Vice Chancellor, I think, or the Dean at the medical school. Were you given any timescale?
We were in discussion and Ray picked that up with the Dean. I don't know if Ray's had any feedback yet. I think it was around Christmas time, so we may not have had any yet. Ray, do you want to comment?
Just on mute, Ray. Still on mute, yeah.
Thanks, Mel. So as recently as yesterday, I had a discussion with Mark Carney, who's the Dean of the Medical School, about this. So Mark is in discussions just to make sure we get the right person really for the role. So he wasn't able to give me a definite timescale, but obviously we talked about the need to prioritise it, because obviously we're without that post at the moment. So yeah, but hopefully we'll have news fairly soon.
Thank you, Ray. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks for your question, David. I guess the fortunate thing at the moment is that we are up to strength in terms of the establishment of 8. So we've got 7 of those 8 in place. So thank you for that. Laura, shall I turn to you for the annual Council of Governors terms of reference? I think that you're seeking approval from governors.
That's right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the Council of Governors reviews its terms of reference on an annual basis, so this is the annual review. We're not proposing any material changes as such, it's more changes for clarification. They're all included in the appendix as track changes, so I don't intend on kind of talking through each one, but happy to answer any questions on those proposed changes.
Thanks, Laura. So again, just looking at governors, we've been asked to approve that. Are you content to do that, or does anybody require any further detail or questions? I don't see any objection. So we approve those Council of Governors terms of reference. Thank you.
Mark, sorry, I think Wendy's put a hand up.
No, I don't have a hand up.
Oh.
Are you waving at you, Wendy? There's too many people to wave, Wendy. You'll have to do the raised hand. Yeah, I'll bring you in, Wendy. Okay, do you want to unmute and?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm just referring to 7.35, known as the Council of Governors Engagement Policy. I'm wondering if you could remind governors about that, maybe by sending a copy to them, would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll send that round, thank you.
Good suggestion, Wendy. Thank you. Yeah, so we'll take an action to recirculate that engagement policy to do with disputes and concerns between the Board of Directors and Council of Governors. And but otherwise, I think we have unanimously approved those terms of reference. And yeah, Wendy, I can see it. Raised hand works, so that's fine. Thank you. Item 9, NRC report. Now, I'm turning to Wendy. Are you to lead on this, or is it David for the report from NRC?
Chair, sorry, I think we've got the terms of reference.
I've missed the other terms of reference. Sorry. Nominations Remunerations Committee. We have the terms of reference there as well. Yeah. So, Laura, are you leading with that?
Yes, thank you. So the Nominations and Remuneration Committee discussed its membership when it met on the 1st of December. And they were talking about a situation where a member was unable to attend meetings and whether it was appropriate for that member to be stood down. And it was noted that that situation wasn't covered in the terms of reference. So we agreed we would make an amendment to clarify that situation and clarify the action that will be taken in those circumstances. So that's included as a track change for approval. There's also some minor amendments to update the job title for the former Director of Corporate Affairs and Governance, and also to clarify that the Chief Executive it isn't a standing invitation, but will attend sort of as required.
Thanks very much, Laura. So the NRC have recommended to Council that we approve the revised NRC terms of reference. Does anybody require any further detail or have any questions? May I take it that we do approve of those revised terms of reference for the NRC? Yeah, thanks very much, we can. Thank you, everybody. And my apologies, we rushed to number 9 there, so into number 9. And Wendy, am I looking towards you or David to present you? Yeah, thanks, Wendy, to present the NRC report to colleagues.
Yes. A number of these items are being dealt with elsewhere on the agenda, so I'll sort of take it as read, but just wanted to point out that we did think about and reflect on the process for appointing the last couple of NEDs, which we've talked about, and we'd actually introduced a stakeholder group or governor group focus group in addition to the interview panel, which worked really well. So we thought we would like to continue with that, and that actually helps include more members, more governors on the process. I think there was a suggestion also that instead of just sending a written report between the group meeting with the candidate and then the panel, that maybe there might be some sort of discussion that went ahead. But that's a reflection, and we haven't, maybe for the next appointment, we'll think about what the best way forward for that is. So we've talked about, we talked about the chairman's appraisal, and Selina came and did a report for us, but again, that's on the agenda again for the Council of Governors. That's about it, unless anybody has any further questions.
Thanks, Wendy. And I can confirm that I've passed to Pat for consideration to perhaps extend the time of the stakeholder panel, given that many of us find that a very useful part of the process. And it is a point at which governors can get particularly involved as well. So thank you for that, Wendy. Again, the Council of Governors is being asked to note the report of the NRC. Are you all content to do that? Yeah, without any further questions or issues, that's great. Thank you very much. And item 10 is NRC membership. So I will turn to Jackie there. Jackie, do you want to bring to Governor's attention what they need to think about here, please?
Yeah, it's really to inform the Council that there's a seat arising on the Governor's NRC, and we're now seeking self-nominations for that seat. Hardev's term comes to an end at the end of this month, January. The next meeting is in March. You can see I've included within the paper the section from the terms of reference regarding membership. So in a nutshell, any current member of the council can put themselves forward to become a member of the seat. In the event that we get one self-nomination, then that self-nomination will carry through. And governors are able to sit for more than one term, so it's open to any governor, including Hardev, whose term has come to an end, to put themselves forward. Just to note that the seats are generally for a period of 3 years. However, if their term ends before that 3-year period, then we will then go for ask for other self-nominations to fill that seat. So if people are if anyone is interested, if they could just drop me an email just noting their interest, and we will then see if where we have more than one, we'll come back to the full council to make the final decision on who takes that seat up. You can see the date in the paper. If by close of Thursday you could drop me that email to let me know, then we can take it from there.
So it's a week today, Jackie, isn't it?
Yes.
Week today, Thursday, 28th of January. Yeah. Thanks very much, Jackie. So again, this is simply being asked to note people content with the process, understand what has to be done. The terms of reference require 3 public governors, but 6 governors in total. So we'd welcome applications as necessary, and indeed from Hardev as well, should you wish to restand Hardev.
Yeah.
Everybody happy with that? Yeah, okay, duly noted. Thanks very much, everyone. We've come to item 11, at which point I'll perhaps hand over the chair to you, David. Selina's obviously ready to lead the discussion on the chair appraisal process. So I'll leave the meeting, and in the hope that you invite me back in, I'll come back when that comes through.
Will Jackie do the inviting back in, or is that?
I think Laura's going to do it, Jackie. Yeah.
Right.
You've got me set up to do that. So, you know, I am hoping I'm taking you through from item 12 onwards.
Yeah.
Cheers, David. Yeah.
Okay then. Thanks, Max. Selina, do you want to take the floor?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I'm reporting back to council that I conducted the appraisal of the chairman in accordance with the chairman's appraisal process, which is agreed by the Council of Governors and the NRC. I conducted that meeting on the 12th of November, and as part of that process, I sent questionnaires to all the NEDs and governors. The exec team and the CEO were also consulted, as were 3 key stakeholders that the Trust has. In light of that feedback, the appraisal process consisted of a review of the chairman's duties, areas for focus, time commitment, and the chairman's contributions and performance as outlined in the report in section 4.1. I can confirm that all the documentation related to the chairman's appraisal has been completed, including the fit and proper persons documentation. And I'm also very pleased to say that following the chairman's formal performance evaluation, the performance of the chairman continues to be effective and demonstrates commitment to the role. On the 1st of December, I presented this to the NRC. The NRC considered the report and were assured that the processes, as agreed by the council, had been duly followed, and recommended that then the council now considers the report from myself.
All right. Thank you, Selina. Some questions from anybody? Dermot.
Yes, thanks, David. Thanks, Selina. I notice on the second part of this this paper, it talks about the chair appraisal process, and at the end there on item 9 on that, it talks about how the formal report and the appraisal and the outcomes, along with the new objectives, will be presented first to the NRC during Q3 and then to the Council of Governors during Q4. Of course, the report that's been submitted in this paper is more of a summary that the report has been conducted, rather than the full report itself, and including such things as objectives for the next year, which of course is always good to know what's going on. So have I misunderstood that at all, or should we be now seeing the report in full in Governor's meeting?
I think that's the point that Laura and Jackie may be able to shed light on.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. Usually the objectives, the full appraisal information goes to the NRC. And so the objectives for the chair aren't necessarily placed in the public domain. So the paper should have been updated to actually indicate that. So I do apologise for that. The paper should have been amended, not to include the objectives within the main Council of Governors arena.
So the guidance is not right?
No, the guidance isn't right, not in terms of the objectives going to the main Council of Governors. They should just go to the NRC. So that can be amended in terms of the next process, when you come to look at the process in April. So I do apologise for that, Deborah.
That's right. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nobody else showing that I can see. So are we has to consider and confirm its assurance. So are we happy to confirm our assurance, given what we've heard? Yeah. Right. Thank you very much. So Jackie, do you want to see if you can let Max back in? Or?
I've just sent the invite, so hopefully he'll be on soon.
I think Max will be getting worried now.
I'll just message him separately as well.
I just confirmed.
I had to wait for half an hour to get in.
So I just confirmed that there are a number of suggestions that the NRC made. I have followed those suggestions up with the chairman, as you asked me to do.
Apologies, I've sent a message. I'm just trying to invite him in again.
So Laura, can he not just come in on the existing invite?
Yes, you can do it that way. Yeah, I just said I'd invite him just so he knew it was okay to come back in. But
I've just texted to say, suggest he comes back in on the original invitation.
Yeah.
He's here.
I think he's here.
He's here, yeah.
I'm back. I'm back. Thanks, everybody. In blissful ignorance of what's been going on for the last 5 minutes. So, okay, that's fine. So we're moving on to item 12 then. Thanks, everybody. I assume item 11 has been discharged, Vice Chair. Yeah, okay. And so we'll go to item 12, which is the quality report locally selected indicator. Just some changes about what's happened with that, with Governor's ability to select a local indicator. So I'll bring Jackie in, I think, to talk us through that one, please.
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, each year the Council of Governors are asked to select an indicator that will appear in our quality report, to have that indicator audited by our external auditors in the same way that they look at other mandated indicators that they have to look at. Now, these instructions come through from NHS Improvement as part of what they call the annual reporting manual. Now, last year, I don't know if, you know, kind of most of you will recall that the council did select an indicator. We set up a governor working group of 2 in October of the previous year. And in January, they came back to the council with a recommendation to ask the auditors to look at the percentage of patients seen within 2 weeks of an urgent GP referral for suspected cancer. Now, that was in January. Towards the end of January, into February, into March, our whole world, if you like, changed. And NHS Improvement changed their requirements in terms of our quality reports. In fact, they did away with the requirement to have a quality report as part of our annual report and submit those documents to them. Instead, they were just interested in seeing the annual report and the annual accounts. What they did in terms of the quality report was they reverted back to the Department of Health and Social Care's requirements for the production of a quality account. They changed the reporting timetable for that, so we didn't need to do the external audit work on the indicators for the quality report. What we were trying to do this year was, to a degree, anticipate what might come from NHS improvement in terms of the requirements. So what we were saying with this paper was, if they did require the governors to choose an indicator, then it was for the governors to acknowledge that, but also be in a position to say, yes, go ahead, set up a governor working group to develop a recommendation that would then be virtually approved by the council. We've actually heard this week, last few days, that they don't require a quality report to be included with our annual report. And as such, there will be no external auditor report on the quality report. So to a degree, the paper is moot. So it's for the governors to note, given the information that we've received in the last few days, that there is no requirement for them to select an indicator from our quality report to be audited by the external auditor.
Thanks, Jackie. Is there still a need to get some governors together to form a group, or
no?
Is that now
There's no requirement to do that. What they'll probably do now is we're still waiting to hear about the timetable for the submission of the quality account. Like we did last year, we'll still be required, I believe, to produce a quality account. Last year, they pushed the dates for that. And there's just a correction to the date in this paper here, where it says the date for the submission of quality accounts was pushed back to December 2019. That should read December 2020. So last year, if you recall, the quality account came to the board for approval in November. After it had been submitted to our external stakeholders, the CCGs, the Health and Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and the Bradford Health Watch. We'd also circulated it to governors for comment as well. It was finally published in December on NHS Choices after it had been approved by board.
Thanks, Jackie. Thanks. So a governor's content to note those amendments. Obviously, you're cited on the papers anyway that come through board. You're able to see all those quality reports, for example, and our quality account is published. So I'll be content to note those amendments for the moment, those changes currently. Yeah, I think so. Thank you. There's no further comments. That's great. Thanks, everybody. I should just welcome Andrew Clegg, our Leeds University Governor. So hello, Andrew. Matthew, you've been able to join us as well, Director of Finance, so thank you. And I think we've Sarah Freeman with us as well, who Associate Director of Nursing. So you're very welcome, Sarah, as part of the discussions here. Okay. Shall we move to item 13, please, which is our Foundation Trust membership plan, and our intentions to try and perhaps make better use of the 40-odd thousand members this Foundation Trust has got. So, Laura, what's our thoughts regarding that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Max. So I think back in March 2019, it was agreed that we set up a task and finish group to oversee the development of a membership plan. So the purpose of that would be to describe how the Trust recruits, engages, supports and communicates with its membership community, and how we will seek to ensure that the membership is representative of our communities. So the task and finish group was set up. An initial draft plan was presented to the governors in January 2020. At that point, it was agreed that further work was required on the plan. But since then, it hasn't been progressed due to COVID-19. So we'd like to restart that work now to get the plan developed, and we'd like to set up a task and finish group again. So if any governors would like to sit on that, please get in touch with Jackie to let her know, and then we'll make the arrangements there. And we're planning to present the draft plan to the governors in July for adoption.
Thanks very much. Is there a timescale to that, Laura, for when you would like people to get in touch with Jackie?
I think if they can let us know within the next couple of weeks, that'd be fine. But we'll send a reminder as well.
That's great. So it'd be great to get people involved there. We're trying to think of more innovative ways to engage with our total membership. We have a number on emails, so we can actually send them our bulletins, for example, and updates. But I think there's more we could do. So we'd look forward to your input into that, please. Okay, and in the absence of any further questions, it looks like you're all content to note that. And hopefully, if you're interested in getting involved with engaging with the membership, do please drop a note to Jackie and let's get going on that. Next item is item 14, the Governor's Code of Conduct. And again, I think I'm turning to you, Laura, to bring to our attention again, a hope for governors to get involved in some work on the Code of Conduct.
That's right, yes. So again, this is a piece of work that was paused last year following the departure of the Director of Governance and Corporate Affairs. So we'd now like to get that started again, and we'll set up a review group. And as you said, we'd like to invite governors to take part in that. So if anybody who's interested in that could let Jackie know by the 5th of February, and then we'll get that work going. And bring a draft code to the next Council of Governors meeting for approval.
You see, you can tell Laura's with us now, can't you? We're getting a grip of all these things to be done. So again, hopefully those governors with a particular interest in the code of conduct, how it should be applied, we'd be grateful for your volunteering. Please do step up and let Jackie know if you can support that by the 5th of February. If people are content to note that bit of work going on, that's great. Thank you. Item 15 is the annual evaluation of skills and knowledge audit. And again, I think I'm turning to Laura to talk us through that. Or is it Jackie? Has Jackie got this one, Laura? Yeah. Yeah. Jackie, if you'd bring to Governor's attention what we need to know.
Yeah, just in terms of this one, there are two parts to this. One is the completion of the skills and knowledge audit, and the other one is the actual Council of Governor evaluation programme. So you'll notice there are kind of two templates on here, two toolkits on here. One of those is about the collective governor feedback about size and composition of the council, management of the Council of Governors meetings, how the council does business, council's effectiveness, role of the chair, and the overall Council of Governors performance. So we're seeking what you as individual governors feel about each of those areas. That information will then be collated and a series of recommendations developed in response to your feedback, which we'll bring back to the April Council of Governors meeting. So it will help inform the Governor's extended work programme moving forward and help us to hone in on any collective development learning needs and other areas that need focus. I don't know if you recall, Max, when you started, we did, kind of look at a previous governor's annual evaluation and look at setting some objectives and so on. One of those was around membership, which we've attempted to follow through on, but that's been slow. But as Laura says, we'll be picking that up again. And so it does give a good measure for kind of tracking, setting number of objectives for the council moving forward and for the trust in terms of supporting the council. The other one is the skills and knowledge audit. Now, we haven't undertaken one of these with governors for quite some years. And I know that it's useful for governors to understand the skills and experiences of their fellow governors. It's also useful for the trust to understand that as well, in terms of being able to support specific pieces of work, but also to be able to kind of use the governor's expertise most efficiently, most effectively within a number of different areas. It's also useful for us, I think, to know kind of how our governors operate out there in the communities, if you like, and what support might be needed, what support, kind of we could provide, or, kind of maybe look at other training and development needs on an individual basis that governors might benefit for and that the trust is in a position to provide. So again, it complements the annual kind of Council of Governors evaluation, I think, kind of quite well, and also helps governors to get to know each other as well as the board to get to know governors, and also our organisation to get to know governors better. So what we're asking is for you to review that toolkit, have a look and see if there are any kind of questions that you think should be included on there that we haven't included, and if you could let us know before the 1st of February, when we hope to send this out, then we can, kind of review those, take a look at them, see if we should include them, send everything out to everybody on the 1st of February, and then expect responses back from governors by the 26th of February, which gives us time then to kind of really sit down, have a look at what people have said, analyse it, and then report back to the council in April.
Okay, Jackie, thanks. So you'd welcome feedback on whether any amendments would be useful, and by the 5th of February, I think you said, and then we'll get it out and have it back completed by the 26th of February. That's fine. Yeah. Pauline, would you like to come in?
Hello. I was just wondering whether we should think about evaluation after each Council of Governors meeting, just to capture, because sometimes you can get, maybe some information or just some feedback, just to find out how, it was performed. Was there any issues, anything that we would like to see a little bit different, but I think it would be good just to be able to capture that on a regular basis when it's quarterly.
Yeah. Sound reasonable, Jackie?
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, good suggestion.
Yeah.
Thanks, Pauline. Yeah. Thank you. Otherwise, colleagues, content to note and to abide by the timescales requested, please. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We'll do that. And paper 16 is the Governor Induction Programme. Again, Jackie, do you want to just bring that to our attention what that's about?
Yeah, again, over the years, we've fallen into a particular pattern in terms of how we deliver our governor induction. So we haven't reviewed it and so on. So it is due for review and refreshing and, you know, kind of reinvigorating, if you like. At the moment, they're kind of two standard modes that we have. One is for individual governors, we generally have a welcome meeting. We send them an information welcome pack. We give them a lot of paper-based information or information that they can access on the website and so on. A lot of heavy reading. There are initial meetings, face-to-face meetings that involve meetings with the chair and a meeting with myself, usually now it would be Laura, and with Sheridan to go through housekeeping as well as to have a general talk about how the council operates and so on. A bit further down the line, what we do is we try and introduce people to our estate with a tour of generally the BRI and St Luke's and where possible some of our community sites. That's with our estates team. We also introduce them to our research, well, the Institute of Health Research, a session with John Wright and tour of the building and so on there, meeting people over there, and also looking at our education team, looking at the facilities that are available, particularly in relation to, you know, kind of the trust as a teaching hospital. We also then usually schedule in sessions, face-to-face sessions with our executive directors, just to find out about their portfolios, who they are, what they do, and you know, kind of current areas of focus. What we haven't been able to do with the current kind of crop of governors who came in around December 19 into early January is actually offer any of the site visits or sessions with executives. So we want to kind of remedy that, but also what we need to be looking at is setting up what we used to offer every 3 years, we kind of missed a year, is a collective governor induction, which is about the here and now. So we need to plan that and make sure that we cover all the key areas that are, you know, kind of important to the NHS, how we operate, where we operate, what we do. A lot of those things will be similar to the areas that we covered previously. It would just be that governors receive updated information. So it's about helping to plan that you know, kind of large scale all governor induction programme, where it doesn't matter how long you've been a governor, because it's useful for people to be on the same page. So it's about planning that session, what that would look like, a template for that, which we can then replicate, you know, kind of over the years, but also changing from it being predominantly face-to-face to how do we use remote technology to deliver a number of the elements of the governor induction programme, so that we can then, you know, kind of use that as a model for individual and collective governor induction. So it's just getting a group of people together, small group, to look at what an individual programme might look like and what we need for delivering our all governor induction.
Perfect, Jackie, thanks. What exactly is the ask of the
so
council on this occasion?
A number of governors to get involved to help undertake that review and develop the new programme. We're looking for at least 3 governors. And if people could let us know by the 5th of February, we're looking to deliver, I think, it back to the council for consideration and adoption in July. And then after July, we would schedule in all the different elements and things that we need for the induction and get that underway.
Great stuff. So governor colleagues, help us create the best induction we can for governors and get people up and running as soon as we can from joining us. So thank you for that, Jackie, and expressions of interest by 5th of February. I should just say in all this, I mean, we've 12 items of business to transact here fairly quickly, and I want to give Mel as much time as we can, because we want to hear from Mel, obviously, about how the hospital is going, how things are running. So it's absolutely no problem if any governors are reflecting on any of the items, or later this evening, having read something, think about something, just send it through to Jackie, and we'll of course always consider any comments that are made. In the spirit of trying to get through this business, I appreciate it, and I'm going to take it that we've all noted that particular point as well. So the last item on this particular business is the Governor Work Programme, Laura, and your thoughts about the coming 3 years for what we'll do as a Council of Governors.
Thank you. Yep. So the work plan for the next 3 years is attached. So that gives details of, you know, the standard reports that will come to each meeting, and the statutory duty and responsibility related items. And we've also added at the bottom the topics for upcoming development sessions. We need to confirm kind of dates and times for those yet, but we've got a few topics planned in for those. So we're just asking the governors to review the work programme and let us know if they'd like to make any additions or amendments to that. Again, you know, if people want to send us comments by email after the meeting, that's absolutely fine, and we can look to add those in.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Laura. So we're being asked to have a look at that programme. If you think there's anything obvious missing, if there are things you'd like further emphasis on, let us know. And we're being asked to confirm that we will review this work programme annually. I'm sure that's in keeping with what we'd expect as a Council of Governors. Can I also say, as Chairman, I'm noting the chat comments, and they're not lost at the end of the meeting. So Laura and the team will pick up on any comments that are made in chat now, and make sure that they're reflected in the outcome of the meeting. Okay, so that's item 17. I'm going to very quickly skip to item 20, just to say, governors, you've seen the reports from the board, regulation and assurance committee for October and November, and audit committee. Governor colleagues have had the chance to speak with non-exec directors, but can I make sure that there's nothing in those documents that anybody really wanted to pick out, highlight, ask questions on? I don't see any hands raised. I'm assuming people have read them and understand them, and hopefully have had any thoughts or concerns taken today. That's fine. I'm echoing with something. I don't know who's. If you could just mute your microphones, please, if you can. Okay. And one thing I didn't mention at the start of this meeting, now that we're going to Mel, is that when we had the quarterly meeting with myself as governors, if you recall, there were 3 or 4 matters raised that I could have given educated guesses answers to, but promised to raise with the CEO for your attention. So I have passed those on, and Mel has reminded me that she will deal with those as well during the course of her presentation. So unless there's anything else urgently that anybody wants to bring up as Council of Governor business, I'm going to pass to Mel, which will be the last items of this open Council of Governors meeting, and we'll invite Mel to briefly tell us how things are going with the running of the hospital, and then also to advise us on system work and local Act as One initiative. So can I pass to you, please, Mel?
Certainly, thank you, Chair. So if I begin with the 3 questions that were asked in relation to the conversations that you had with Chairman. The first one was, are there any staff declining to have the vaccine? If so, how many staff are declining? Are there any patterns emerging? Really, it's too early to tell in a sort of a scientific way. At the moment, anecdotes suggest that there would tend to be a lower uptake in younger members of staff. You know, whether or not that's a kind of a trait of the young that they oftentimes feel pretty invincible against lots of illnesses and conditions. It could be that, and in some of our younger BAME colleagues as well. Whether or not that is a consequence of some of the fake news and some of the media coverage about risks in taking the vaccination, I can only imagine that is the case, but we're trying to assuage people of those views and opinions by giving factual information to encourage them very strongly that this is the only way out of this pandemic, and we have all of us a responsibility to get vaccinated and to protect ourselves and those around us. There was a question about the vaccines that we're currently using and whether or not we will use other vaccines. We're a hub, a hospital vaccination hub, and of course there are now many hubs in operation, primary care network hubs, soon to be community hubs, and indeed 2 other hospital hubs, both Airedale and Linfield Mount for Bradford Care Trust. We are currently still using the Pfizer vaccine, excuse me, the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, with its limitations in the way it can be stored and handled and transported, and for that reason it lends itself to be given in the facility that we have. It's not easily something that you can pick up and take to a patient's home or to a nursing home or a social care setting. We have the stability, we have the storage equipment to make it safe to use, some very low temperature freezers that are required to keep it stable and safe when being handled. Of course, there are other vaccines that are now emerging and being licensed to be implemented. The AstraZeneca one, the Moderna one, and of course in Bradford we've been heavily involved in the trial for the Novavax vaccine. Lots of participants across our communities involved in that, with Professor Saralea leading on it, and that in time we hope will be found to be efficacious and licensed and begin to be deployed. Staff reporting any signs and side effects from the vaccine. The first dose of the vaccine, of course, there are 2 vaccines that are required to be delivered for full protections. The first dose seems only to produce mild symptoms, including some arm soreness, stiff arm, mild headache, perhaps just feeling generally off it. Limited numbers of staff have so far received the second dose because of the national stance in prolonging the interval between those vaccinations up to 12 weeks now. And on the reporting of staff having had the second vaccination, there were slightly more marked symptoms after the second vaccination, some short-term sickness and absence associated with that, which was a sort of general malaise and tiredness. So nothing extremely out of the ordinary, but much like some people have reacted in the past to the flu vaccine, I guess. Question then about our oxygen supply. This is, I can understand the question in a sense that ultimately it is about the supply of oxygen, but there is a subtlety involved here. It's less about the supply as in obtaining a supply of oxygen that we can then pipe through to the clinical areas that require it for administration to patients, and more about the capability of our internal infrastructure, the pipes, so to speak, that take the oxygen from the very large tanks that we have at either side of the BRI building to each of our clinical areas. And it does have its limitations, but because we have in the first wave had the foresight, I guess, to put additional resilience in our stores by having 2 systems that work in tandem, we do have greater resilience and capacity to provide oxygen to where it needs to be. However, the demands on that oxygen at this particular time, actually, in this, which is probably our second peak of our second wave, and I'll come on to just reference that in my update, we are seeing many more patients requiring high levels of oxygen interventions. And where that is the case, sometimes on a ward or department, the capability of that infrastructure is being exceeded. And what we have to do then is move patients around to other wards and departments to try and even out the demand across the whole of the site instead of concentrating it all in 1 or 2 or 3 areas. So in the sense it causes a logistical problem, and it means that we have to spread our COVID patients, our most sick ones, over more ward areas, and that has diseconomies of scale in terms of how we deploy staff, but it does keep us within the tolerances of our infrastructure to deliver the oxygen that is required safely and consistently. So I think they are all of the questions, Max. Happy to take any supplementaries that might occur at this point. If not, I'll just go straight into my update.
Yeah, that's a complete record of the questions that arose that I couldn't answer myself, Mel, or be certain of accuracy in my response. So, yeah. Alistair, I'll bring you in, and then we'll let Mel continue with her update. So, Alistair.
Very short question, Mel, around the vaccination uptake. I just wondered if you said it's it's younger people, perhaps on average, are less likely to uptake. I just wondered if you saw a gender difference, and the reason I'm asking is in a different setting I've come across a view amongst young women that it may affect their fertility, and this was a hospital setting and it was a health professional, so I just wondered if you'd come across that.
I'm going to bring Karen in. I think Karen's on the call just to say what our sort of hospital data says, if anything, at this point. But I will concur, because I came across 2 members of staff in Marks and Spencer's, and we were chatting, and the first question I asked is, have you had your jab? And both of them said, no, I'm not getting it. And therefore ensued quite a long, prolonged conversation in which I was attempting to persuade them that it was safe to do so. But one of the reasons why one of the individuals did not want to take it was for that very reason that you've described. Karen, are you able to?
I think Karen might have dropped off the call, as you know.
If she has, she's probably gone to a vaccination thing. We may not have the numbers, Alistair, in any event, but yes, you're right. I know.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you're aware of that issue, and therefore the conversations were.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
I'll just go on to our my update, and it will be largely as I delivered at the board yesterday, and that is available on YouTube, as this will be in due course. But it's October the last time I think that we came together in as a Council of Governors, and October was the time where we were kind of very much in the throes of the second wave of the pandemic that started really in the beginning of September, when schools went back and universities went back, and little bits of normality started to resume, and then inevitably, I guess, there was an increase in the prevalence in our community. A couple of weeks later, then we begin to see admissions. A couple of weeks later, after the admissions, we begin to see demand for critical care start to increase. Our peak in the second wave was an inpatient number of 178. And since that time, the inpatient numbers began to reduce slowly, down to a low of 83 over the Christmas period. Now, whilst all this is happening, of course, we have been very attuned to the media coverage of what has been occurring in the south and the southeast of the country, and the experiences probably most notably in London, where over time, quite quickly, there was an increase in the amount of prevalence and the number of patients being admitted to those hospitals down there, with a fear, I guess, that much like the first wave, that would begin to creep up the country, and to a certain extent it has done that, because in the Midlands it's now reported that the Midlands are under as much pressure now as the south and the southeast. Correspondingly, from early on in the new year, our own COVID number of patients steadily began to increase from that low that I've alluded to of 83, and today's figure is between 140 and 150 inpatients who are either confirmed COVID positive or highly likely to be when we get their test results. There are differences in this second wave in some ways, and this new variant, which was heralded to be the cause of the sort of exponential rise in the south and southeast, is indeed accounting for between 50 and 70% of all our new inpatient cases. So it's not a matter of when it gets here, it very much is here already in Bradford District and Craven. And whilst the clinical presentations initially are very, very similar and consistent, it appears that our inpatients now are requiring much more intense critical care and are of a younger age group this time. So today we have a pretty full ITU, plus approximately 40 people on non-invasive ventilation of some description to support their breathing. Caring for such high numbers of these COVID patients has greater requirements both for intensive support in critical care environment, but also this non-invasive ventilation, and brings with it significant challenges on how we provide adequate levels of staffing to support the delivery of safe and effective care. And it also, of course, has significant impacts on our other non-COVID services. And what we have to do, therefore, is be innovative and imaginative in redesigning those services in such a way that we can maintain them in a safe way with a less resource. So good examples of that over time have been our use of digital support in an outpatient setting. When I say an outpatient setting, it's actually not in a physical building. It's an outpatient consultation via telemedicine or via video conferencing or via telephone triage. There have been others, and if you watch the weekly roundup on video that we put out on social media, you'll have seen things like the drive-through cardiology clinics at St Luke's and many other services that are designed to either reach out to patients or to intercept patients really in their own homes before they would need to present to hospital. There have been, however, significant impacts on waiting times for other patients whose care is by necessity delayed because it requires them to come to a face-to-face appointment, or it requires an admission for an investigation or a procedure. There are, currently a significant backlog of those patients, and will continue to be so whilst ever we have had to redirect staff, redeploy them into those clinical areas that require an enhanced level of staffing to care for our most sick and vulnerable patients. On the 23rd of December, all chief execs were in receipt of a letter from Amanda Pritchard, who is the Chief Exec of NHS Improvement, and Julian Kelly, who is the Chief Finance Officer of the NHS. And in that letter, it described the priorities for the next 3 to 4 months. There were 5 areas that were highlighted. First and foremost was responding to the COVID-19 demand, and I've described, I think, how we have done that. This is for almost the third time, really, in this particular area that we have peaked and troughed in terms of the COVID spread of demand. Implementing the COVID vaccine, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, now that Karen's actually left the call. But Karen is the joint SRO for the vaccination programme across our place.
And Karen's in the vaccination meeting, actually, Mel. She has just texted me. Yeah.
Maximising capacity in all settings to treat non-COVID patients. So that is a bit about the innovation and imagination, but also using the independent sector to do some operating, and then responding to the urgent and emergency demands that you would normally expect to happen in any year, way before COVID ever was known about, because of winter. So the traditional winter pressures as we know them. And then a final one, which is incredibly important, which is supporting the health and well-being of our workforce. And we have had to respond to that with a number of mitigations and support strategies to enable staff to keep well at work. In the first wave of the pandemic, we had up to 600 members of staff off as a consequence of the pandemic, or they were isolating, or they were shielding, or they were suffering from COVID themselves. We have not had that level of sickness in the following waves, but we are experiencing quite a significant number, not as much as that now, but certainly over 200 staff who are absent for those reasons. And that adds to the challenge of ensuring that we've got safe staffing in clinical areas. There is also a requirement for us to turn our attention to, as we would in any normal year at this time, to planning for the forthcoming year, for 21-22, both in terms of an operational plan that usually responds to the expectations that are articulated by NHS England, and to develop a financial plan that allows us to live within a financial envelope of our allocated resources for the same period. Ordinarily, that comes with quite a lot of detailed guidance to inform those expectations and to elaborate on them. But at this time, the NHS is so very, very much consumed with dealing with the pressures of COVID at a national level that the normal planning information has been delayed. Notwithstanding that, we as an organisation are having those conversations in any event in response to those 5 areas that I've already articulated, because we can't really wait for more detailed guidance. We know what needs to be done, and we know how to prioritise the actions that we think will best respond to those. In terms of the staff resilience, we have invested in psychological support. We have invested in facilities to provide staff breaks and downtime whenever they can sort of disrobe from their PPE and take a minute to themselves. We are trying wherever it's possible to make sure that staff have proper breaks and proper annual leave where it's possible to squeeze that in. It is incredibly hard to do that, and staff are reluctant to even contemplate leave in some instances when they know that that will leave wards and departments short. And in many respects, we should be incredibly grateful that staff are willing to go the extra mile to support colleagues and to provide that degree of commitment and care to our patients. But it does ultimately mean that in not too short a time, having gone through 3 waves of this, that our staff are becoming more and more exhausted and emotionally drained, and sometimes just a thank you goes a long way, but oftentimes it's just not enough. So we need to be really, really cognizant of that. And we do try our best. We've invested heavily in psychological support for either on individual basis or on teams basis. And we are minded always to respond positively to anything that staff suggest will make their lives better. And that's certainly been our mantra throughout the last 12 months. Because I'm going to come on and talk about place separately, and I can capture much of what I said yesterday, that was all I wanted to share at this point, Chairman. Happy to take questions.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Mel. Wendy put a point in the chat there, Mel, about your figures not entirely tallying exactly with the figures on the daily email. I wanted to respond in the chat by saying I think that reflects the previous 24 hours and that you may be more up to date than that daily email. But how would you respond to Wendy's point?
So the figures are a moment in time. or in the 24-hour preceding period. In any given day, the numbers will fluctuate by a factor of between 20 and 30, because we will have a number of discharges and a number of admissions. So it's not an exact science, but it's right at a moment in time.
Thanks very much, Mel. Yeah. And did anybody else have anything further that they wish to raise with the Chief Executive? I picked up on, in the earlier meeting, Mel, there was a suggestion from a couple of the staff governors just to keep a balance in messages regarding how hard and difficult some people are finding it, that if they keep being told that, it can sometimes have the effect of staff members feeling that they should feel a bit down and exhausted and tired. There was a suggestion that actually staff sometimes are quite resilient and able to bounce back themselves. So I did promise I'd pass it on to you. I know how positive you are in the messages you give, but it was a suggestion made in the earlier meeting. Alistair, would you like to come in?
Yeah, thanks. Mel, I've wondered if post-COVID, I don't really mean post, because I'm not sure there'll ever be a post, but post the situation we're in, you know, close to a peak and so on, when COVID becomes whatever it's going to be as part of the normal course of life, i.e. a less acute situation, I'm wondering if there could be an exodus of staff who are just exhausted and kind of have had enough of a long period in a sort of acute period. And I wonder if you have that on your risk register, that there could be an exodus of staff in I don't know, 6 months, a year, 2 years, and you may have different problems to face as a result of that.
So staffing per se is on the risk register pretty much most of the time, because we always have instances where in some specialties, more than others, there may be difficulties recruiting. At the moment, you know, it's about recruiting enhanced numbers of staff. It's a very good point. I'm sure it will be the case, but equally, it's a little bit like the point Max has made. If you kind of, you're damned if you do and you don't, damned if you don't. If you acknowledge that staff are tired and emotionally drained, you know, you run the risk of suggesting that they are, and them agreeing with that. And if you don't, you run the risk of people saying that you don't acknowledge that they're tired and emotionally drained. So these are the kind of balances that we have. There are gives and gets in terms of the impact of COVID. So I know that as a consequence of just the wave one, and the experiences and the coverage that the NHS got and the profile that the NHS got nationally, that there were more applicants to nursing, to undertake nursing degrees, allied health professional degrees, medical schools, etc., than anyone could ever remember. So it had provided a stimulus for people to consider careers in the NHS. Equally so, there will be, I'm sure, people who say this isn't for me anymore. But we've also had instances in quite significant numbers, actually, where we have redeployed staff into clinical areas who did previously not have clinical jobs, and they have enjoyed it so much that they are now considering or are actively taking steps to move into a caring role formally, or considering undertaking further university education. So it's a mixture, really.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And can I just add a quick addendum to that, Max, which is, of course, I know from my position that there are lots of enthusiastic applicants for nursing degrees and so on. I just wondered, therefore, is there much work going on in trying to develop new placement opportunities, because training placements is often a limiting factor in a hospital setting, and it's very difficult in this period, I'm sure.
Yeah, there are ongoing conversations. We've thought about, just this week we were discussing putting short placements in occupational health because clearly there's a much greater demand for occupational health from our own members of staff. So that could present itself as a very meaningful placement. We've thought about all sorts of different ways we could sort of put more placement capacity forward. I had a conversation with Pam Bagley at the university just last week, where we talked about some of the pressures, radiographers, and indeed today I've spoken to the chief radiographer lead. I think we're expecting 16 new radiographers to join us in the next cohort, 16 placements, but that's because that's what we've been offered from the university, not because that's the maximum number we can take, because I think we could take more. So I'm sort of advocating that we go back and say, actually, we could find some more placements if people are prepared to work flexibly, then we could do that. So for us, I would hate that to be the rate limiting factor. I think there's a window of opportunity on which we should capitalise for this interest that has been generated in the NHS. It won't stick around for all eternity, I'm sure, and therefore we should sort of make hay while the sun shines and make sure that we don't lose any of that.
Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Alistair. Yeah, thanks for your questions. And thank you, Mel. And thanks also to Pat, who I can see has picked up on a question from from Dermot, and hopefully answered that point. But do use chat if necessary. Governor colleagues, we had until 5:30 anyway set aside to work together. Can I propose that we set a very strict 6 o'clock finish limit to also deal with the closed meeting as well? We'll need 10 minutes to deal with the closed meeting. I fully understand if people have to go, but, you know, we meet once a quarter with a lot to transact today with Laura in post, and it's great to have time with Mel and to hear from her as to what's going on. So can I suggest that we place a very strict limit on 6 o'clock, which Mel, I suggest, would need a 5:45 definite finish for the Actors 1 presentation and time for questions, please. I hope that gives plenty of time. As I say, there is no offence taken if people have to drop either temporarily or permanently off the call, but let's put a strict 6 o'clock finish on time and pick up now with Mel on what's a really important part of our development as a trust, which is our leading place in developing system responses throughout Bradford and Airedale. So Mel, I'll turn to you again, please, and invite you to tell the governors about the Actors 1 programme.
Thank you. So about just over a year ago, when I came into post as Chief Exec and as lead for Bradford District and Craven Health and Care Partnership, working with other partners, i.e. the leaders of the organisations that represent health and social care delivery in this place, we took the opportunity to refresh and refocus the work that had been undertaken by the respective health and care partnerships, one in Bradford and one in Airedale, Wharfdale and Craven, over the preceding couple of years. And we decided that we would refresh, rebrand as Actors 1 to convey to anyone looking from outside the aspiration of us working much more cohesively and collaboratively as a bunch of providers and commissioners, and that we would rationalise the programmes somewhat so that we could hopefully make more impact than perhaps had been the case up to that point. So if you could just advance the slides, please. Actors 1 really is trying to achieve, it's the vehicle by which the happy, healthy and at home strategy that predates my arrival in the patch can be delivered and deployed. So people will take action and be supported to stay healthy, well and independent through their whole lives. They will be supported by, first and foremost, their families and communities through prevention and early intervention, with a greater focus on healthy lifestyle choices and self-care. There's a phrase I picked up recently that I think accompanied a document about a hospital without walls, which essentially is another way of describing this approach, I guess, and that is health happens at home, hospitals are for repairs. So that's a helpful sort of mantra, if you like. But this sort of pyramid of taxonomy, if you like, of interventions represent that in terms of the size of each of those layers, you know, the majority of things that keep you well, the biggest proportion of that triangle is healthy lives and support of a thriving local economy and a community. And then you've got a little bit more about intervention. Then you've got self-care. When all those things fail, you might default to primary community care. And then only when primary and community care cannot cope with what it is that you have as an issue or a challenge or a problem, you defer to specialist care. And we would be the top end of that triangle for a smaller number of our populations. And all our programmes in our Act as One refresh are what we describe as end-to-end and whole person. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll illustrate what I mean by that. The structure, and we'll come on to the programmes themselves in a sec, but the structure, i.e. the governance, that is the mechanics that pins all this together and makes it happen, ultimately, as the overarching fora that is concerned about this stuff, is the Wellbeing Board, previously known as the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's now called the Wellbeing Board. It's just changed its name. And that's chaired by the leader of the council, and there are any number of individuals represented in that fora, including myself and my colleagues across health and care, other chief execs and the accountable officer of the CCG, as well as people from the face sector, education, housing, social care, etc. It's a very broad church. Then we have this architecture through which we work together collaboratively. So we've got the health and care partnerships, and under that we have our system programmes. We have enabling strategies, so they are people and digital and estates. These are the things that we need to make our ambitions a reality. So if we have an ambition, for example, to keep people out of hospital by using telemedicine, then we need a digital and IT infrastructure that enables that to happen. If we want to design fit for purpose buildings and good, healthy, conducive environments in which people can either undertake self-care or can default to hospital care, we need good estates infrastructure. You know, a really good example of the impediments that we're experiencing now as a consequence of having a building as old as the one that we do have at BRI, as beautiful as it is architecturally, it is not conducive to the delivery of 21st century healthcare. When you're dealing with a pandemic, the last thing you want is a Nightingale ward with no single rooms and lots of opportunity for pandemic to spread, even inside the hospital. So we've got to have a good estate infrastructure. Then there are other system fora that are really important. So we have a finance and performance fora. We have a quality and safety fora that is led by our clinicians. And we have a clinical forum and a strategy forum, so that the respective leaders on strategy, for us people like John Holden, and John will have an opposite number in each of the providers, the Care Trust, Airedale, the commissioning function, local authority. They can sit together and talk about not just a strategy as it applies to Bradford teaching hospitals, but a strategy as it should apply to the whole of the place. And then we have a function around our development as an integrated care partnership. So it's okay to put these boxes on a sheet of paper and say you fit in that box and this is what this is about. But much of that really has to be underpinned by agreements. So our basic governance tenet really is a strategic partnership agreement that binds us into behaving as good partners. And at the moment we are refreshing that, and in fact our representative on those conversations about that is Max, our chairman. And so we have to have good governance and decision making and audit trails, and we have to have a way of sharing the resources out fairly and appropriately. So they are the functions that help us be the best we can in our endeavours to act as one. Could just move forward, please. So our priority programmes are seven areas that we have designated as the ones that we will concentrate on for probably the first couple of years. And to be fair to us, I think if we had not had COVID in many respects, we would have been a little bit further on than this. But what we have done is committed as a place to keep working on all of these areas, not to down tools and say, you know, we'll just pause Act as One until we get through the pandemic. What we have done is say, well, actually, let's use Act as One where it's appropriate to do so to help us in the pandemic. So a good example of that would be we converted some of the work that the respiratory work stream had decided it would want to do into prioritising the flu vaccine and administration of the flu vaccine across place. And as a consequence of that, we had something like a 25% increase in uptake this year for the flu vaccine across our whole place, including the primary care networks and staff on the front line in the providers, compared to the previous year. And that's excellent because it meant that we were all working together to the same end. Really important because it was felt, and still is, that on top of COVID, a flu pandemic or even increased rates of patients suffering from flu would have been pretty disastrous. So the priority programmes are access to healthcare. This is about how we as a secondary care organisation work more closely with primary care colleagues to make sure that when patients present in primary care, that they, as far as possible, are managed in primary care, and only the ones that need to come through to us as a secondary care provider come to us, so that all the prerequisite tests, advice giving, etc., is done in primary care. That doesn't mean that we are asking primary care clinicians to do all that. What it means for our part is that our clinicians are reaching out and doing some of that via telephone triage and advice and other mechanisms that I've previously alluded to. The second area was better births, because we took the view that actually the outcomes for women having babies in Bradford District in Craven are actually not necessarily as good as they are elsewhere in the country. There's lots of reasons for that, but we really need to do better. For our part, we had the CQC report that had found us to be requiring improvement in that particular area. It was the one area that really we had to pay much more attention to, and as a consequence of that, there's a very, very significant programme of work called the Improving Maternity Services Programme. It's reported on a monthly basis to our board. But in fairness, and by necessity, it does have a very internally focused orientation. But the actual outcomes for women and the outcomes for babies are more impacted upon by the things that happen outside of this hospital, not inside it. It's the things that happen pre-conception. It's the things that happen in antenatal care. And it's about having women who are, as well as they possibly can be, going through a very positive experience of their pregnancy and being fit and well and delivering healthy babies. And we can only begin to impact on that when we work together as a system. So the Better Births is all about that. Children and young people's well-being is another area, and this is about bringing mental health and physical health very much together. Respiratory, as I've already mentioned, has dealt with flu, but it's also looked at people with chronic lung disease. At the moment, it's also looking at how we can provide COVID aftercare for patients suffering from long COVID, and it's also looking at how we can better look after COVID patients at home whilst they are suffering from COVID, as opposed to having to bring them in to hospital. We have a Healthy Hearts work stream. We have an Ageing Well work stream, which is led from the Airedale end of the patch. And finally, we have diabetes. So they are the incredibly high impactful areas. And the reasons, you know, if you read anything about public health in Bradford District and Craven, you will see the statistics, which are quite salutary. You are 4 times more likely to suffer from heart disease. You're 4 times more likely to suffer from diabetes and a lot of cancers. So just today, Sarge and I were on a call with the Cancer Alliance with a very exciting project that we're going to embrace in the Access to Healthcare programme around early intervention and detection of patients with potential lung cancers and how we will better manage their care. So if you could advance the slide, please. Here are some of the things that we are doing in that space. We're on Better Births working with community partners to share key messaging around access to maternity services. Healthy Hearts, there's a huge focus on self-management for patients with high blood pressure. Diabetes, we're using new decision aids for GPs and patients at high risk of COVID. Ageing Well, we've revised the programme board agenda to increase focus on discharge pathways. Respiratory, we're using the digital hub at Airedale to provide respiratory patients with support when they are in their own homes. And in the Access, we're looking at clinical validation of waiting lists to ensure that patients who are waiting for whatever reason are monitored and seen within their priority order, i.e. the sickest first. And on children's and young people's well-being, we're working with school heads to support school staff and redefining approaches to students in year 11 and 13. So if you get a flavour of there is something for everyone in each of these areas. So I'll just return to the sort of mantra of end to end. The way that I described when we were setting these programs up, what should be the scope of our ambition as a system to make it relevant to everyone around that table is, for example, in respiratory, it is everything from air quality to whether or not we have sufficient critical care capacity to respond to the COVID pandemic or indeed any other pandemic, and everything in between. Because in that regard, we're not just appealing to the people who deal with very sick people when they're in hospital, or only appealing to the people who are very focused on health inequalities and environmental impacts on health. We're appealing to everybody to work together to make a contribution to this particular work stream in a way that acknowledges the patient and their families as a whole entity with both physical and mental and psychological needs. If we could advance the slide. So far, we've had real positive feedback about the prominence and recognition of our brand, not just around Place, but in other places across West Yorkshire and Harrogate. Every programme board has, as I've alluded to, a very broad church of membership. It has BCS, it has primary care, it has public health, it has CCG, NHS Trust membership. In Healthy Hearts, we've got a multi-agency heart failure group, and all of these are happening not just in Bradford or not just in Airedale, they're across Bradford and Airedale. So we're looking to eradicate variations in practice and variations in access to services. For Better Births, we have a focus on perinatal mental health with the local authority. Aging Well, we've got the continuation of what we call the Super Rota, which is a collection of people to be able to respond to the needs of our at-home population. I've mentioned the respiratory in relation to flu vaccine. These things, you know, one trusted referral pathway for children and young people sounds, you know, not that big a deal, but when you have multiple assessors along a pathway, actually getting to the point where one person can be trusted by all agencies to do the assessment on their behalf is a significant development. In Access, we are working very closely with the independent sector to try and recover our elective surgery activity and address our backlogs. And in Diabetes, we have a very, very strong clinical forum of primary and secondary care colleagues leading the change in all of those areas across the whole district. So if we could just advance. Looking ahead then, acknowledging that, you know, we've also been dealing with COVID. I sort of set the challenge in the meeting last week that, you know, we really need to, as soon as we can, put our foot on the gas in advancing the programmes. We will continue to kind of split ourselves between the sort of short-term pressures and the longer-term impact for as long as the pandemic is hanging around. We need a way of moving resources around our system, because if the intention is to actually prevent hospital admissions and to move people to a place where most of the care gets delivered outside of hospital, then if most of the money is invested in hospitals, how are we going to make that happen? So we need a mechanism for being able to safely and in a way that doesn't destabilise the discrete pieces of the architecture that works well currently, to be able to be applied to each of those service areas. We're unlikely to have specific funding for transformation. Our commissioners would say the way that they operate is to give all the money to the providers, and therefore if any more is required, then it has to be through the movement of the resources, as I've alluded to. But equally, we need to think of ways in which we can generate some headroom financially to enable that to be the case, and that is ultimately by trying to deliver services in the most cost-effective environment, in the most cost-effective way. And we need to work much more closely with our communities. I think it's been a number of years actually under discussion about whether or not as a place, in order to kind of support the Act as One programme or its predecessor, whether there should be a joint investment from each of the partners in a specific lead for communications and engagement, and we've just managed to secure that. So after several years, we have someone called Shak Rafiq, who currently works at Leeds CCG, who joins us on the 10th of March as our lead for communications and engagement with our communities. And that will be done, not one person can do that, but we really need to kind of link into the faith sector, the voluntary sector, the people who are boots on the ground, respected in their communities, have a voice and are heard by communities, and they're the ones who can help us make some of this stuff happen. I'm not sure if there's another slide, is there?
No, that's the last slide now.
Right. Excellent, thank you. So
I'm going to say, I think I'll intercede anyway, Mel, in the spirit of trying to keep us to a particular time.
Yep.
That was an exceptionally good briefing. Thank you. There's a couple of quick questions come in. Can I suggest to governors, if there's things that have arisen there that you'd just like to query or ask, there's absolutely no problem with sending those through to Jackie. We will direct them and we'll answer your questions. So take it all in and have a think about that. But we did get one question just put in the chat there, Mel. So let's try and deal with that now, and we'll close this matter off. So Pauline's asking whether it was challenging to agree on what should be the priorities, the 7 priorities, and where the 7 areas that can be considered, our views gathered from service users to inform decisions, and what do we envisage that are the main challenges to keep it going, to ensure sustainability. So maybe if I could ask you for a 2-minute answer on that now, then we'll close this down.
So you could literally do anything, but it's kind of, you spread yourself so thinly in trying to do everything that ultimately you do nothing, or you don't do very much. So we went for the things that we believed would have the greatest impact. So when we look at the CCG data about right care data, for example, what has the most scope for being able to be transformed, being able to be delivered out of hospital, being able to be done in a more economical and yet equally effective, if not more so, way, we came up with those areas. So there is a science behind it. We didn't include stroke necessarily, but stroke has been done. So the reconfiguration of stroke services have already happened. But equally so, the predeterminants of whether or not you are going to have a stroke, guess what? They are very, very similar to those that will also give you a heart attack. So there was a bit of a crossover in that we kind of also realised that sort of promulgating the approach around Bradford Healthy Hearts would also serve to reduce strokes.
Thanks, Mel. And in terms of sustainability, in terms of building something that will remain for the future?
I'm not quite sure of the question and the specifics on what bit of sustainability, but in terms of the momentum and the buying and the commitment from partners, I think it's very strong, and I'm told it's stronger than it has ever been in terms of the history of working in this space. So I think we've got a lot to be optimistic about. Plus, we've also got the added opportunity to capitalise on the consultation that's happening right now about the increase in prominence, authority and autonomy of such structures as I've just described in place, relative to how the integrated care partnership will work at West Yorkshire and Harrogate level.
I think it's a model to stay, Pauline. So yeah, thanks very much for your question, Pauline, and to you, Mel, for the detail which you've given. Thanks very much. I'm going to close that item down now. We are at the end of our open Council of Governors meeting, but I should just turn to non-exec colleagues and ask whether any of you had anything further that you wish to add before we close the meeting. And I'll also make the same offer to David as my vice chair. David, we've obviously transacted a lot of business today, as well as hearing a thorough, detailed report from Mel. And I know governors have been at it all afternoon in discussions. So is there anything you'd wish to add, David?
No, I don't think so. No, just thank Mel very much for her detailed update and the presentation on Actors 1. So no, nothing further from me, certainly.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. Yeah, I mean, obviously I turn to David as vice chair. The non-exec directors, there's no hands up there, so, and obviously people have had a good opportunity to speak with non-exec directors. So I propose that we have dealt with our business. There was no other business, and so we've come to the close of Council of Governors open meeting. Thanks very much for your attendance, everybody. This is a recorded meeting. It will be published. The nature of the attendance has been terrific. There's been a lot of governors here, very, very few apologies, and just about every exec officer other than Paul who's just joined us. And so we'll make sure you meet Paul very soon. the meeting is finished. The chat is retained in order to advise the notes of this meeting and whether anything else needs to be dealt with. And we'll move straight in now to a different meeting, which is the closed meeting, single item agenda.